How are you guys doing? Good. My name's Matt Stubenhofer. Fairly new here. Gave a lightning talk a few weeks back, but I'm going to go ahead and run down Bootstrap 4 and making a portfolio in Bootstrap 4. If you are more familiar with 3, Carson actually gave a talk a few months back about that, and that's what I used to build my first website. But I figured let's learn something new and do Bootstrap 4. So we'll just start it out. Here's my contact information. These slides are up, and all of those are links if you're looking for a quick, easy way to get a hold of me. My website's mattstub.com. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter at mattstub, and there's a link to the repo for everything here. First of all, what is Bootstrap? If you're not familiar with Bootstrap, it's pretty much they call it a framework. I think it's more like a library for building a kind of a responsive website. It allows you to plug and play a lot of classes that they've already defined, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is to make something look responsive without actually having to write any CSS. They use a 12-grid column system like Stuart was talking about. Allows you to kind of keep everything contained. And then you kind of just, initially you're supposed to design this as a mobile first and build up. I didn't necessarily do that on this one, so I would look at that on yours, like take it from, if someone who's looking at it on an iPhone 5, how do I make it to look that way and then make things pull out? That's probably the way everything's going, and that's the best way to design. Getting started, there's a link in the README of this repo about getting started writing any project, really, and it talks about sketching it out. I am one of those people. I sketch things out. This is the simple little wireframe I did for this website when I started, and you can see the red line because that's when I was like, oh, well, I'm going to need some spacing here. So I'm a by hand person. I always write everything out, so I would start there. Also, when you're starting with something you're not familiar with, make sure you read the documentation. Bootstrap 3 and Bootstrap 4, not a lot of differences, but enough that it could get you in trouble if you weren't paying attention to it. And then it's a portfolio, so the file structure is probably only going to be 3 files. But if you're adding more stuff to it, you might as well get in the best practice of making sure you have everything in the right file structure. Because if you start a big project and you just throw everything in one big folder, then it's going to be a huge mess later. So you might as well take the smallest project and replicate the same practices every time. And then kind of come up with, these are the fonts I want to use, these are the colors I want to use, I've got some pictures I want to put in. Like, have all that stuff set aside so you're not doing it while you're actually working the code. Again, that's the sketch. We'll keep it there. And I'm going to use Emmett and Lorem. So we're going to kind of fly through this. If I'm going too fast for anybody, just tell me, but it's probably better to not try to code along unless you know Lorem. Let me get out of my settings here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start a file. Now, I'm typical to using index.html because it works with GitHub pages, so that's how I've always written things. With Bootstrap, get back here real quick. Here's the Bootstrap site. You can go to version 4, version 3.3 up here in the corner. Just make sure if you want to use 3 or 4, you're on the right one. And you can start out with this boilerplate. For this instance, we're going to. But there's a lot of stuff you've got to take out as well. So I'm not going to overload my file with all their JavaScript, but I'm going to copy it over and get rid of it later. I don't need all that. Don't plan on using it all, so I'll just go ahead and get rid of it. It pretty much gives you everything. Just make sure you change your title. We're going to, if I can key over here far enough, just going to make it real simple here. It's going to be my page. And the reason I say to copy their boilerplate instead of just using built-in is this meta name viewport with device width. It's kind of the engine that builds the responsiveness that they have. So if you do all of this in Bootstrap and then you forget that tag, no, I don't think any of it's really going to work the way it's supposed to. Styling might, but the responsiveness probably won't. So this is going to look really funny with the font jacked up at 20, but Just trying to make sure people can see. If somebody can't see, let me know. We're gonna get rid of that altogether. I like to line out my pages like I had with my sketch. I've got everything in place here. Get back here. So I have everything's kind of on the right side. You'll see it says Navbar. Sorry, it's kind of janky handwriting. Navbar, I've got a header or a Jumbotron section. I've got a section that's an about my projects and then my footer. And so to make sure I don't miss things, I usually just make myself some comments and give myself some room in between. And that's just a personal preference, obviously. It's not going to affect anything. And we're going to go ahead and start with the Navbar, and I'm going to copy and paste. This is about one of the main things I'm going to copy and paste, because the one thing I found when I was looking at Bootstrap 4 was if you're familiar with Bootstrap, it can get really messy really quick. And the Navbars especially, if you're looking at Navbar and you don't know what you're looking at, it is a mess in Bootstrap 3. So in 4, they've kind of made it a little cleaner. You can still get as nasty as this if you want. We're going for something real simple here. So this is the Navbar I'm wanting, but I'm going to shift my stuff to the right, and I'm going to change the color here. Let me copy this, and then I'll scroll down to the color. So down here you'll find the color scheme, and we want this Navbar dark, BG dark. So just need to remember that. We're going to change that out. And then we'll just go ahead and plug it in here. And it's going to look a little dirty because of the fact that the font's up, but all we really need to change up here is this top class in your nav is we're going to make it Navbar dark and BG dark. And then one thing you want to do is if you want to sticky it to the top or you want to put it on the bottom, you just make sure you put that fixed top is what most people do. Just stick it to the top there. And then we'll leave the home section in place. I don't think I have one on my personal site. I think you can just click the brand name and it takes you back. So we'll just start out here, about, projects, and a contact. And we need to make sure, we need to take out this disabled class just because we're not disabling it. And then we want to reference these hrefs, I'm sure most people know, but they're basically internal links to the page. So it's what allows the Navbar to actually work. So pick a name that you're going to remember down the line here, if you can spell it right. And that's about that. Like I said, if it's in a reasonable font, anything under 24, I think this will look a lot less messy. It's actually pretty tight, which is what I was kind of, I felt like it was really good because, like I said, my Navbar in 3 is huge and it doesn't need to be that big. We're going to start here with the header. And if you're not familiar, I actually learned Emmet from watching Carson. And if you're not familiar with it, look into it because it saves a lot of time and a lot of headache. So we're going to it's going to be a Jumbotron, and it's going to be a class Jumbotron fluid. And that's, you're setting up a header. I guess I should probably put that in the middle of the page there. Header with a class Jumbotron and a Jumbotron fluid. If you want to add an ID, you just add a hash on it. And then, of course, because I got off the line, it's not going to work right. Tron fluid. And we'll just add my name is pretty much how I want it to look for now. And then we're going to do another header. You could probably do just a paragraph if you wanted, but this is kind of the way I styled it earlier. And we'll just call it an aspiring web developer. And I'm going to try to go through this and show you guys how things look as we step. And you notice we haven't written any CSS. All we've written is a few lines of HTML, and we're already here. So we get into the About section. There's an app called Hemingway, and it's listed in the README. When I first wrote my bio section, I don't remember if it gave me it was a really bad score because it was wordy, it was long, there's a lot of unnecessary stuff in it. Like, use Hemingway if you're coming up with a description on a project or you're using it for yourself. You plug this text in and it'll tell you, like, this is kind of too heavy, lighten it down, this is how long it takes to read it. You want to keep it short and sweet. You're not trying to tell everyone where you came from and who your parents are. So I'm going to use Lorem on it because I don't feel like trying to spend an hour coming up with a description for myself. But again, here with Emmet, we have our main element. It's got a class container, and then the hash, it's going to be the ID of about. And then we're going to give it a header 2. And I want to align this text to the right just to kind of give it some difference. I don't want the Jumbotron to run into each other. And another class that Bootstrap 4 has is you can actually have an H4 element with a display one class, and it will display a huge text. But I think, and I'm not big on SEO, but I do believe that on your SEO scores, your header elements actually play a part in how you rank things. And so if you want to have a header 2, but you don't want it to be big, you can use these classes like display 4 to bring down the size. And we're just going to put in, who is this guy? And then we're going to do a P element with text to the right. And we'll just write some Lorem real quick. No big deal there. You go back, and here we are. So, like I said, I wanted mine left to right, just so things didn't run together. It didn't look like a big running novel. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip the project section over real quick and do the footer because the projects is pretty much the meat of this. But the footer, I'm going to keep it real simple. It's just going to be a contact, and it's going to have a bunch of links to my stuff, just a bunch of icons, really. So we're going to use container fluid, and it will be contact. And then we're going to use a header 3 element. We're going to center the text up. And again, this is all Bootstrap 4 stuff that I don't have to do myself. And it's just going to be real easy. Contact me. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Font Awesome and their pack. And the one thing that Bootstrap 3 has is you can use their glyph icons that are built into the library. They don't do that with Bootstrap 4 as far as I'm aware. So you would actually need to use, I'm using Ion icons here because I found them just looking for a new library. And they're, you know, they're not as big as Font Awesome, but what I need for this instance is all here. So we're going to go down here and copy this in because this is pretty much the meat of our contact section. And we'll just go ahead and link it to up here. And when I did this earlier today, I sat here and tried to figure out why, basically what I just did there. I href'd the style sheet and was calling it the link or relating it to the link. And I was just like, well, this is not working right. Couldn't figure it out, but stare at the same code long enough. That's usually what happens. So back down here, all we're going to do is throw a bunch of icons, and then you can wrap them in an anchor tag to make them linkable. I'm not going to take the time to do that. I hope if you need help with that, let me know, but I'm not going to take the time to wrap everything in an anchor tag. But so what we want to do is I just want to take these social icons, and I'm not a touchpad guy here, so sorry for the lag, but you can just click on it here and it brings up Ion Social Facebook. With Font Awesome, I think you have to put an FA class in and then an FA with the long, whatever their icon is. So we don't have to do it with Ion icons, we just put Ion in. Makes it pretty easy. But I'm going to make this a row. And we're going to add this. Contact icons is when I was writing my wireframe, I came up, okay, I'm going to need a class because I'm going to need to style this stuff. So again, it's all about planning ahead so you're not putting it up here and then trying to figure out like, where do I need my own styles at? So contact icons is something that we're going to use, that we're going to define here in a second. And I want to use the content center. And then same with icons. Instead of like a header or a div or section, you can use and make it real easy here. We're actually going to do the Android Mail. And then we're going to use we'll just do GitHub. And I don't know how people feel about linking their Twitter. I don't know if I want a whole bunch of my employees really scouting that out all the time, but maybe you are, and that's fine. So we'll go back here, and that's what we get. We'll touch the styling. We'll beef it up here in a second, but just kind of keeping track of what's going on the page. So with the project section, before we get too involved in it, one thing that came up the last time when Carson, I think, was doing a talk, and we've talked about it before, is how do I show employers what my skill sets are without literally listing out like the typical resume stuff of I can use Word and Excel 13 and I can type on a computer. How do I list my skills without making it look like a big run-on list? And one of the things, and I'm sure people who are familiar with GitHub see, is at the top of your repos, you'll see this nice little progress bar. And if you click on it, it will tell you roughly what your code is. And I was sitting there looking at it like, well, that's actually a really good idea. Like, I can show that I'm writing this much JavaScript in my files or this much Angular. The only problem is GitHub doesn't differentiate. So if you're writing Node, it's not going to tell you it's Node. It's just going to tell you it's JavaScript. So if you wanted to figure that out, you'd obviously have to calculate your averages. But if you wanted to make some assumptions and not put exact statistics in there, you could still do the same thing here. But so we'll build the project section, and then I'll come back in and put the projects bar in. But I actually really like that idea. When I was looking at it, I was like, this is a great way of me, other than me just typing in, like, I use jQuery for this project. So this is the longer section. This is the one that the wireframe really helps if you're looking ahead, because I've got containers inside of containers with nested columns. And the first time I laid this website out and I just started going through it, figuring everything out after I had the content on there was a big pain in the butt. So when I went back through and I'm going to go ahead and wireframe this whole thing out and figure it out, it was a lot better. But we're going to use a fluid container because we want it to span the whole class or the whole screen. And this is going to be the project section. And then we'll put it inside of a container. And we'll give it a heading here. Play 3. And it's just going to be our project section. Nothing fancy. This coming up here is a personal CSS class, the app wrapper. I know a lot of people, and it's personal taste. I get really confused when I first started and I would name my stuff like, this is my project container. And it's an easy way to think about it, but I would scroll through my code and I would see container, project container, container fluid, and it would all just run together. So if it works for you, great. I guess if it works, great. If it's not, I use app wrapper. It's kind of the same thing. But inside of that, we're going to have a row, and this is where our, well, are we going to have a row? We are going to have a row. We're going to have a row for the whole project inside of the container, just to kind of give it a little bit of padding. And inside of that, we will have a column of a certain, I'm using 4 and 8, so column that's basically 1/3 and 2/3 for the image of the application, and then 2/3 of it's going to be the meat, the description, the title, links to it, the progress bar, all that stuff. So we're going to put an image in here. And I went ahead and found an image ahead of time so I wouldn't have to go find one. You can use, I on my personal website, I would screenshot all of my projects, the forward facing, and I would basically crop it down, make it a certain size, and that's what I use for mine. I'm just going to use a real generic image here. And the source is that. I would always give it an alternate, just so if it doesn't load for any reason, people at least know what they're kind of looking at. We're going to call this a JavaScript calculator. And then we'll go ahead and start this is the meat here. It's a column medium 8. And this is where all of the content will live. And we're going to add another row inside of it. And this is what I was talking about, how everything can get really messy really quick. The one thing that a lot of people don't think like about Bootstrap is you're nesting inside of nesting, but it gets very spaghetti-like after a while. And Bootstrap 4 does a little bit better job of that, but not incredibly. It's still kind of spaghetti-ish. So we're going to do a span for the title because I want my title and my buttons to kind of be in line. So instead of messing with changing the styling of a div, we'll just use a span. Small 8 app title. And it's going to say JavaScript calculator. And then let's go back here real quick and look. With their buttons on, I don't think this was a feature on version 3. It might have been, I may have not seen it, but you can make button groups here. And so instead of having 2 standalone buttons, we actually have 3 buttons in one. And that's what I'm choosing to use here. So they're about as easy to build as a normal button. You're just going to say, we're already inside of that span class. Yep. So it's a span. Guess I should just, there we go. It is a smaller column because I don't want my buttons to take up a bunch. And then here's the Bootstrap it's a button group, and that's going to make the 2 buttons into one. And then I want it to align to the top. I don't want it floating on the bottom there. And then we're just going to put 2 buttons in. And this is the one thing I don't like about Bootstrap is you have to outline the button, and then the class of the button, and then the link on top of all of it. There's easier ways to do it, I think, but Bootstrap makes it quick. Let's put it that way. We're going to use an outline dark, and we're going to make it a small button. And this is just going to be where people can go to get the code, the source code. And I think it's important, especially if you're going for a developer job, don't just link to the app. Yeah, they can find the code, but make it easy, because if you're looking at employers are not going to, they'll want to see what the design looks like, but the heart of what they're wanting probably is to look at the code and see how you came up with what you came up with. So don't leave that off. Make sure you kind of include it there. We're going to copy it again. And same thing. And this one will be the app. Let's just go out here and look. This is going to look really messy because we got to handle the image, but you can see kind of where we're getting here. The title is actually hidden behind the image at this point. We're going to get out of that span and start a new row. And this is where the description would be. Again, I'm going to use some lorem real quick because I don't want to type up one. And then we're going to get to the progress bar. The progress bar, I'm going to go ahead and copy this because it was a lot more to type out than I wanted to mess with. But you can see right here, so you've got the labels. You can leave this in or you can take it out. All it is basically putting a value inside of the div. It's not a huge thing there. You can also use the standard colors, the success, the warning, the danger, info, all those color classes can be used. They actually have some striped ones if you want to do that as well. But this is what we're doing here. We're going to do the multiple bar. Got a little bit bigger there. I'm sorry about the touchpad stuff. And we're going to go back out just outside of that div. So I will just go ahead and add some real quick stuff here. We're going to use ion icons again because they had some tech icons down here. You can see the HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. They don't have everything, but most of the stuff you're probably going to work with, they have an icon to go for. If not, find a different icon library, same thing. And we're going to just do this is a basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript one, so I'm going to give the HTML a class of danger. And this is where it's going to basically push the bar out how far ever you want to make it. And I pulled this off of one of my projects earlier, so I had a value of 49.2. I also have to change this area value now, or aria value now. I don't know if I'm saying that wrong. And then inside of the div here is where you want to put, we're going to put an icon in it and we're going to put the value so it prints out to the screen. So again, you're just doing an ion icon with a class of social HTML5. And right next to it, we'll just bump a space out here and put 49.2%. We'll go back and take a look at it real quick. It's not styled yet, but you can see where we're going with it. We're going to go ahead and change this JavaScript to a warning. That'll print a yellow tag. It's kind of running off the same premise of what JavaScript or what GitHub does. And we will change it to 36.1. 36.1. And again, in here, inside the div, we're going to give it a social of JavaScript. And 36.1%. Oh, good catch. Good catch. Thank you. And this will be the, we're going to stay with the BG info because it's a blue. And we're going to just, this is going to be the CSS. And the value on it is 14.7%. Oh, we actually want to leave that value in. All right. So, oh, I chalked that clause somewhere. Oh, there it is. Get that right. So, it's not the best way, but like I said, illustrating what you can do without literally listing a bunch of skills, I think is if you can find a better way, I'd love to know. This is the way I kind of found that I liked. So, we'll just leave it at that. I'm just going to go ahead and copy all this for sake of time so we can have two next to each other. And I don't think I'm going to change much. Oh, coming all the way down here. Make sure we didn't beat anything up too bad there. Okay. I think I've missed something. I'm not used to working with fonts this big, or I guess a font size this big. Well, we'll see here in a second when we start styling it. So real quick though, you've got all of this and we haven't even made a CSS file yet. And obviously we need to make one, but just real quick to see what it is that Bootstrap does, we'll come up here and take the Bootstrap file out, and you can see what you're getting with it if you do it right. And so if you're not one that wants to learn a bunch of CSS right off the bat, like I said, using a framework or library will help you turn that into something, well, if it'll load like that. So with that, we'll go in and we will make a folder again, we're only going to have one style sheet, but we're going to make a folder anyways. And inside of that folder, we are going to make I usually just name mine main. But we're going to start out here and import the fonts that I chose. And there's a resource on the README called Font Pair. Stuart talked about it as well. There's a bunch that will show you different fonts and what combinations work best. Font Pair is dealing specifically with Google fonts, and that's what I prefer to use. So I went to Font Pair and found some fonts. These are not matched up fonts, but I'm just kind of showing some difference in styles. The two that I found were Architect's Daughter and Hind. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this in right at the top. Well, if I copy it. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and just lay out. I want my headers to be in the Architect's Daughter because it's kind of a cursive font. And then I want my body elements to all be in the Hind font. So we'll just start out with that. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. We're just going to give it a backup sans serif font in case it doesn't load. And then one thing that I took away, especially from Stuart talking about, was the contrast in colors. And I had listened to a podcast talking about the WCAG, and I honestly did not even take that to be an accessibility issue, but blacks and whites are not good, apparently. You need something that's a little softer. So I'm going to use something just a touch softer than black and something a touch softer than white. And it's something that I learned just listening to a podcast. I thought it was kind of interesting, but we're going to change the font color to basically a dark gray. And I tend to use RGBAs because I like to play with the transparency, so that's a personal preference. And you're not going to really probably know, oh yeah, you know what we probably need to do first is link to the actual style sheet if we want that to show up. So you just come in here, you can put it, I think you could probably put it anywhere you wanted. It is a style sheet. And it is just styles main.css. Yeah, there we go. Not a big change yet. I'm basically going to use that Architect's Daughter across all my headers. So just to be safe, I'm pretty much going to add all of them that I think I used. And again, we will give it the class Architect's Daughter. And if you're looking for help on how to specify that, this is why I love Google Fonts. It pretty much tells you how to put it in. It shows you how to import it right there. And it tells you also how to call it in your CSS right there. So pretty handy. And it calls out for a backup of cursive, if I can type. Making sure I'm doing that right there, okay. Why does that not look right? Anyways. We will go back and see if that showed up right, and it did. Again, not probably what I would choose for a professional website, but it works just to show some differences. The next thing I want to work on here is the spacing kind of with the Jumbotron. I think I might have something called out wrong there, but we're going to see. Might have something to do with the fact that the page is jacked up to 110. But I want to give it a little bit of styling, get it away from the windows, give some padding, and kind of make it a little bit bigger. So one thing I used to do when I first started out, I think my actual portfolio is actually coded all in pixels, which is bad, especially when you have a big, huge screen, then you try to look at it, you send it to your buddy on your phone, you're like, hey, look at this, and nothing shows up right. So REMs, M's even, the REM, I think it's like a root element, so it's going to base its size off of what the default font size that you're looking at. And then you have VWs and VHs, which I didn't call any of those out. I think they're called, it's in here somewhere. Viewports, there you go. So VW and VH are viewport width and viewport height. And that basically is making things a little bit more dynamic and responsive. We're going to change the color of the background of the Jumbotron just slightly, just so I know that it's gonna jive with our project section. We're gonna give it again a rim, and that's just adding some padding to the top, and that's all the padding I want to give it. And again, this is just shy of black, or it's just shy of white, sorry. I guess it's just shy of black. Something is not, something's not lining up with the padding, but again, I think it is. I think it has to do with the fact that this is, nope, it definitely doesn't. Okay. We'll look at that here, see if we can't figure it out. Next, we're gonna go down here to this about section. There's not much I wanna change, I just wanna space things out. I don't want everything to run smack dead into each other. I'm also gonna, I guess, lay out all of the spacing for all of these sections right now. Just go ahead and get that out of the way. And since we called it and we want to be specific, and I can't remember who it was that gave the CSS talk, but they talked about specificity. And so I lay my files out like this. I always call my elements and then my classes and then my IDs. And so since we have an ID for an about for the projects for the contact, it's as specific as it's going to get. So I figure we might as well just go ahead and use those. We're going to just give it some padding for rim and 0. And that's basically 4 rim on top and bottom and 0 side to side. You can kind of see that there. It just kind of pushes things around. On the contact section, and again, I'm kind of OCD in the fact that you'll see me keeping everything in alphabetical order, which it's probably going to catch me at some point, but right now it hasn't. So we're going to give it a height of 20 rim, and we will give it a little bit of padding on the top, not so much on the bottom. And I think that's it. Yeah. We're giving it padding there because we're fixing to boost up those icons, and I kind of need space for it to take up. The project section, you can see there's a lot of run-on going on here. We're going to change that a little bit. If I can type. And again, this is the same color that we called up top on the Jumbotron because I just wanted things to kind of flow through. Didn't want to change up, didn't want to add a bunch of images. My website actually has 2 images, and I'm not really happy with it right now because to me it kind of looks comic-y. That's a personal preference, but it's probably something I will change here soon. So again, I'm kind of hard up on just easy, natural, neutral colors right now. And then the last thing we need here is we've got everything kind of spaced out, but I do want a little bit of space between my project's header and the projects themselves. So we'll go ahead and take care of that. And I don't want, like, I could call what I'm about to call on the H2s, but I specifically want it on this one element. So I'm only going to call it on this one element. And it's just enough to push it away here. So let's do the contact icons because they're pretty easy. Let me go back up here. They're all classes. So going back to my OCD-ness here. So we have the class contact icons, but I'm not looking to style that whole container basically. I just want to style the eyes inside of it, but I don't want to style every icon we've got. So contact icons eye, and just boost it up, give it some more height, I guess, some more size. Sorry, falling asleep over here, I guess. And we're gonna push the padding side to side. I don't want a whole lot of padding on top. I just want them side to side. And that's what you get. Pretty easy, 2 lines of code in CSS, and you get a little bit bigger there. The one thing, though, that you'll see here is when I hover over the top of them, right now, obviously, they're not anchors. When you put anchor tags in, you'll also have to make sure you take out that default styling. But I do want it, when I hover on it, I want the user to know that, hey, we're hovering on this, so we're going to give it a pseudo element here, I think. I think I'm saying that right. And again, there's, especially when it comes to anchor tags, you'll have like hover, visited, just typical tags. I think there's 4 actually that go with it. So you'll have to kind of address that when you take a look at this. But all I want to do is give it a little bit of a transition, and we're going to ease it in, and 400 microseconds. And then we're going to just change the opacity a little bit. And so you can kind of, I don't know if you can see this at that point, you might be able to, you just barely see it, but you can also tell when I take my cursor off, it snaps. Not the biggest thing in the world, obviously, but to make it more fluid, and come back in here and add the inverse of that. And I know I think you can do ease in and out, or ease in out, but for some reason it wasn't working, so I just went ahead and put ease out at the same 100, or the same time. Oh. And now when you come across it and when you come out of it, it's just a little more fluid. Again, it's simple little things, but it is things that probably people will pay attention to at some point. Let's go ahead and knock out that app wrapper. Let's give a little bit of styling between this, because it looks pretty bad. And we're just going to start off by giving it a border, just so we can see what we're working with. And again, not going to use black. But, okay, so we have too many, I've got too many divs going on in that second one there. Where are we at here? I don't know why. Let's take this out real quick. I'll have to look at that here in a second. That's what I get for copying code, I guess. So on the app wrapper, we also want to rein in this image. Obviously, that's not the size of the image I want. You can hard code that yourself by changing the pixels inside of an image tool if you want. Like, I use Paint still, honestly. But we're going to give it a radius on the, are we inside the, no we aren't, okay. We're going to give a radius on the border here, just so we can kind of not make it look so abrupt. Very subtle. Probably didn't even see it, but it's subtle. And then I want to give it a little bit of sizing between each of the elements, because if you had 10 projects and they were all slammed up on each other, it would look pretty bad. So we're going to just add some margin in here. And of course, because I have that wrong, let's just go ahead and take that second project out and recopy it. In fact, I'm going to change some settings real quick just so I can play with this the way I normally see it. There we go. And then I'll put it back real quick just so I can tell what's going on. Okay. So, there we go. And that's why we're missing that. I don't think that's originally why, but it is now. Come on down to the end here. Better, okay. Let me change those settings real quick so you're not going blind trying to strain your eyes. Okay. So there you go, you get a little bit of padding between them, but we still have an issue with the image slamming up against the side, and everything else is kind of slamming up because we didn't take care of the padding. Let's go ahead and take care of that padding real quick. And sorry, I'm using a cheat sheet that I did everything beforehand. That's why it's actually going this fast. I'm not just pulling this out, trust me. This took me well over a week to get right, so if you're thinking this looks easy, it's not that easy. But simple style, just kind of bumping things out here. And then if you can tell, and again, it's subtle things here. This is gray, and this color is also the same gray, and I don't like that because it's not focusing people. People are just scanning through it, not focusing. So we're going to give the wrapper a little bit of a background color just to kind of pull that focus back in. And one. Again, I know it looks like I'm just pulling things out, but this was all done pre-hand. So not a huge difference, and probably on the screen, it's probably very hard to tell a difference, but looking at it on my computer, I will tell you there is a difference. It's almost like a subtle white as opposed to subtle gray. If you were going to use an orange or a red or a blue or something stand out, obviously you would definitely tell, but we're not using that. So the last thing we need to take care of on the kind of the overall here is this image is still running over. Now it's got a class image responsive, but it's, for some reason, I don't know if I'm calling it wrong, which I probably am. I probably didn't read the documents or the documentation right, but it's taking up the whole as much as it wants to. So we need to rein that in. And this is where do as I say, don't do as I do, because I didn't read the documentation well enough on that class. But I'm just going to give it an auto height and a width of 100%. And then we're going to also give it a radius so it doesn't look so abrupt. 10 pixels. And there we go. Now we're a little bit better here. And basically, I think if I understand the image responsive class right, it should have basically done that for me. Again, like I said, read documentation. Don't just pull it out like I did. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to bump the title up, because the title is just kind of lost with the wording. And then I think we'll kind of go with the progress bar. And then that should pretty much do it for the structure. And so on the title, again, this is a class that we made up ahead of time. And I'm going to go out of order here a little bit. We want the font size to be 2 rims. And we want it to be a font weight of bold, because I want it to stand out. Pretty easy there. I think there are some fonts that you can't use bold fonts on, so be careful, or bold weight. So be careful when you're using that, because that might be something frustrating. I also want to give it a little bit of padding to give it away from the content here. So we're just going to put a padding on the bottom of it, of the title. And it is, I'm trying to run through this here because I have just about 2 things left. So the last thing on that is getting the buttons kind of toned down. And since I didn't use buttons all over the place, I'm going to be very generic and just specify button. And I just want to make it not as big. Even though I said small, I want it a little bit smaller than small. So, didn't run on there. Let's just close out of that. And there you go, kind of make it a little more uniform. You can use separate buttons if you want. I just did this because I'd never actually seen button groups until this week, and I kind of liked it. The last thing is the progress bar. I want to give it a little bit of space, a little bit stand out, and I want people to actually be able to read that without going blind. So we'll just go down here, and I'm going to jet through this real quick because we're running out of time, and then I will show everything at the end. And I don't think we'll probably get to the smooth scroll, just because I'll probably have not enough time, but if we don't, and you're wondering what I'm talking about, if you're looking at a normal website and it doesn't have a smooth scroll and you click a link, it just snaps to it. It doesn't smooth scroll down to it. So I have a gist of it. I actually copied it from Carson, and there's a link to it as well, and you just plug it in like any normal JavaScript you're going to put into a file. It's pretty easy, pretty generic. we're going to give the icon some style here. 0.8 rim. And then I'm going to give those specific skill icons, and I hope I remembered to put that class because I'm starting to wonder if I did. And a little bit of padding on it as well. And lastly, the icons inside of the actual skill icons. And this is definitely not, I'm not a CSS master, obviously, and I'm pretty brutal with it, actually. So I would definitely tell you to study up on CSS. It's something that I need to definitely do, because you can make a pretty functional website and a pretty functional program, and if your CSS is doo-doo, then your program might as well be as well. So there you go. We're just basically making the bar a little bit bigger. We could definitely make the font size a little bit bigger as well to make it easy, but don't let it run outside of the progress bar. I am missing one thing, though. What am I missing? Progress wrapper. Anywhere. Somewhere in there I'm missing something. I think it's probably this. And I don't think that's right, but yeah. It might be because it's blown up. But with that being said, we have basically taken all of this and thrown it together real quick. Let you guys, I mean, like what Carson said and what Daniel said and everybody said, if you don't have a portfolio, get one up. Throw one up like this real quick and get your stuff up and then work on it. Because if you're trying to get a job and you don't have a portfolio up, you're not really presenting yourself. Portfolio could be like an active, just advertisement to anybody. So again, this is not if you want to see the final product that I came up with, it is also in the repo. This one, obviously I'm missing, like my Jumbotron spacing's a little off. The links are not right. I'm missing classes down on the way. And then as well, and I'll just copy this real quick because it's actually should be pretty easy. It's inside the presentation here. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that whole folder out. And then at the bottom of the website, let's hope I did this right. Equals scripts. Smooth. Oh, you know what? I'm going to need jQuery as well. And luckily I had that pulled up at least. All right. Let's see. There we go. So obviously it's a small website. It's not going to do a lot, but you can see it kind of working there. Again, inside of the repo, there's a test run folder that has everything all broken out. I actually included the Emmet that I used. If you want to read more about Emmet, I mean, it's not a documentation file, but you can take what I'm doing here and you can look at what I've got here. So let's just try to do that as a handy. There's also a bunch of resources that I used and some links to like this gist for the smooth scrolling plugin if you want. But other than that, I think I'll just go ahead and call it. This last was basically me just saying Bootstrap websites all feel the same, kind of like a Squarespace website all feels the same. So when you get it up, don't leave it bootstrappy. Try to take the bootstrap out of it. Try to use it, but don't abuse it. So that's all I had on that slide. Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to nitpick me a little bit? No? How many hours did it take me to do that? Probably about 5 or 6, I would bet. So, and that's probably just actually coding. I don't want to know how many hours I spent reading. My wife could probably tell you that, but anyways, anything. Yeah, yeah. I as far as how I coded it, I would do I think it was probably 3 or 4 hours at a time. And then, like I was telling Kimberly this morning, I ran through it again to make sure. So, and even obviously, somewhere along the way, I lost a class and forgot. But they're not, the nice thing with Bootstrap is it's not hard. If you know your way around it, it's not hard to get something up and running. So there's no reason not to have a portfolio other than being lazy like some of us. So, any other questions? All right. Appreciate it.